everybody hear me? That's a long walk for a 140-year-old guy. I'm often referred to as J.B. Williams, but my name was actually John Brent Williams. Brent was my mother's maiden name, and that's how I got that middle name, and my father's name was John. We moved to Missouri in 1816. Not even a state, certainly a wilderness, a lot of Indian issues still in the state at that time. My father had actually, we came from Clay County, Kentucky, and my father had helped found the Smithton Company. And if you're familiar with Missouri history, you know Smithton was the early county seat of Boone County, later became Columbia. But we settled there on Hinkston Creek in about 1817, and I grew up there, went to the Bear Creek Academy. My father died when I was just about 9 years old. Left my mother with 6 children, still under the age of, can you hear me now?
Yes.
Still under the age of 6. So I knew I needed to do something to help support the family, so I was offered an apprenticeship in a local newspaper, the Missouri Statesman, owned and operated by a guy named Major Rollins, who was an upstanding man in Boone County and later became very famous during the Civil War. Well, as an apprentice, I learned to be a typesetter. I ran errands, I folded papers, I did all those kind of things that a young apprentice would do. And then finally, in 1846, after I'd kind of established myself, I married a young woman named Eleanor Keene, K-E-E-N-E. Eleanor was a determined young woman, beautiful. She'd been my neighbor. I'd known her for years. Shortly after we married, we decided to strike out on our own, and we moved to Fulton, where I purchased a partial interest in the Fulton Telegraph. We lived here about 4 or 5 years, and I decided I wanted a little bit more adventure in my life, so we packed up and moved to Mexico, Missouri, where I purchased a half interest in the Mexico Ledger, which is still a paper in existence today. We operated the Mexico Ledger until 1850. I sold my interest out, moved back to Fulton, and purchased the entire interest in the Fulton Telegraph and became the sole proprietor of that newspaper and stayed the sole proprietor until my untimely death in 1883. Now, during my time as the newspaper editor and owner, I also doubled as a reporter, which many editors did in those days. So if there was an event in the county that was of great interest, rather than send a young reporter, I would go myself and interview the people involved or watch the situation and then report that in the paper. Our paper was well known for reporting all the necessary political issues of the day, all of the births, deaths, any deprivations that had occurred in the county. And I saw a lot of bad things. The time period of the war was very bad. My newspaper was shut down on more than one occasion. My press was threatened to be destroyed. I tried to be neutral in all I reported, but if you have young men in your county being arrested and put in prison, it's hard not to report on those things. I did survive the war and thought really I had gotten past all of the really bad things that might be happening in Callaway County. Little did I know what was on the horizon in the 1870s. There was a guy who was a bushwhacker during the Civil War. His name was Peter Kessler. He had a couple of sons who kind of rode with him. He acted as if he was on the Confederate side, and many people thought when the war was over, Peter Kessler and his sons would end their minor crime spree here in the county. But unbeknown to us, that's not what happened. Turned out Peter really wasn't a guerrilla. He was just a thief. That's all you could say about the guy. Well, he made a mistake, and he stole a